Come with me and my family on a trip to West Yellowstone, Montana, where we stuffed 5 people, 1 wheelchair, and all of our junk in my husband's truck and our RV, and drove 1,200 kilometers, stopping at random campgrounds along the way that may or may not have been wheelchair accessible. Did we make it there and back in one piece? Let's find out. The first stop on our road trip was at our acreage, where we picked up our RV, which was going to be our home for the next 10 days. We recently upgraded our RV from this one, you may have seen in some of my older videos, to this one, which has way more room for our family, but that was also really tricky to get used to in a wheelchair. Before we left, my husband had to mount my lift to the trailer so I could get in, modify the toilet so I could flush it because it was a foot flush and I needed to be able to flush it with my hand, and I had to figure out how to get on the bed, which was a really high and awkward transfer. After breaking a screen with my head, I only fell into the window a few times, and more than a few frustrating moments, we got everything figured out and we were ready to go. Our second stop on the road trip was a campground near Milk River, Alberta called Writing on Stone Provincial Park. It is an historic Indigenous site that's located at the base of a valley and surrounded by sandstone rock formations commonly referred to as hoodoos. I booked the campsite hoping it would be wheelchair accessible, but I didn't get my hopes up because I knew that it was unlikely given the pictures I had seen. I was so confused when we were driving to the campsite because all I could see in front of us was a big open prairie with no hills and certainly no rock formations in sight. As we turned down the last road with the GPS saying that there was just 5 kilometers to go, I was convinced we'd taken a wrong turn when out of nowhere a valley appeared, and let me tell you, the drive into that valley was breathtaking. Amazing sandstone rock columns greeted us as we wound our way down the road to the campground. What a neat natural wonder hiding in plain sight. I could tell right away that wheelchair accessibility was not going to be realistic at this stop. I could have chosen a more wheelchair accessible location to camp, but I try my best not to make my wheelchair the sole focus when we decide on what activities to do on vacation. And I didn't want my kids to miss out on seeing such cool natural architecture, even if it meant I had to miss out on some of the experiences. We made it to our first stop last night on our trip to Montana, which is a place called Writing on Stone Provincial Park near Milk River, Alberta, and it is one of the coolest places I have ever seen. I am currently sitting at the top of this valley alone because my family went to explore the rock formations, which are commonly known as hoodoos. I'm really sad that there's no accessible area in this valley that we can hike together in, but I'm very glad that I have a beautiful lookout to view the valley from and to just take in this crazy scenery that we have in the middle of this open prairie. Is this crazy valley with all of these sandstone formations, and it's really cool. So I'm in the visitor center. The visitor center is right behind me, which is totally wheelchair accessible. So if you do come, the visitor center is fine, and there's all these cool outdoor things that kind of tell the story of how the rocks were formed and all of that stuff. So there's definitely a few things to see here if you're in a wheelchair. And the campground is fairly accessible. It's gravel, so that was kind of annoying, but it's definitely a place to see for sure. If you come to Alberta, just a beautiful, beautiful area. It's just one of those things that, you know, is one of the crappy things about being in a wheelchair is that I have to sit alone sometimes when my family goes and does things that are absolutely not wheelchair accessible, not even a little bit. I'm actually kind of freaked out sitting at the top of this hill. So yeah, definitely can't do it. There's just too many skinny spots. But there's a longer hike if you are able-bodied down at the base of the campground, and then there's just this free exploration spot where you can go check out the rock formation. So there's lots of cool stuff to see here. The beach had a wheelchair access mat thing out to the sand. So that was really cool because normally I can't get to a beach at all. And even though the river is extremely low, so it's not good for swimming, it was a really nice little beach area that would have been fairly accessible had the water been higher. I tried going lower on the beach where the sand was kind of soft and I just got stuck, so I turned around. But I'm super glad that they had an access mat that went out at least far enough that I could watch my kids go and dip their toes in the water and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to find a place to perch and chill while my family has some fun. While the hiking trails might not have been wheelchair accessible, the visitor center and the campground definitely were, which was a pleasant surprise. The visitor center was filled with activities and displays that told the history and cultural significance of the area, and I was able to spend time with my family exploring and learning for at least an hour. The next day, we made breakfast in the trailer and headed south to the US-Canadian border, where we experienced a small snag in our itinerary. We're at the border, and I disclosed that we have a little block of cheese, some eggs, and a head of lettuce in the fridge, and now we're being inspected by agriculture.
And smokies.
Yeah, and some hot dogs.
And wiener buns,
I don't know why you're complaining. It's a normal thing.
Yeah, so now somebody has to check out our food, apparently.
You didn't tell them we got chips.
Boo. This is really
chips.
annoying.
What about cookies?
So hopefully this doesn't take super long. After throwing out our contraband lettuce and eggs and getting the all clear from Border Patrol, we made our way to our third stop on the road trip, Great Falls, Montana, where we stayed at a mediocre campground just long enough to wash some clothes and go to bed. The next day we stopped at Denny's for breakfast and then headed to Walmart to buy groceries for the rest of the trip. After spending way too much money on food, we headed to our fourth destination, Bozeman Hot Springs and Campground. The drive to Bozeman was so beautiful, filled with mountain views, blue skies, and so many rivers. The landscape in Montana is a weird mix of lush greenery and brown desert-like rolling hills, which is very different than Alberta. We paid for a deluxe campsite at the hot springs, which cost $288 Canadian for a single night, so my expectations for this campground were really, really high. We arrived at around supper time, and the campsite did not disappoint. Our deluxe site was huge with a concrete patio that made it super easy to get on and off my lift, which was super nice because normally campsites are just gravel and it can make the lift a bit uneven, especially if the gravel's uneven, and hard to get on and off. Our campground stay got us free admission to the hot springs next door, and even though we were all super excited for the hot pools, they ended up being a bit underwhelming. The pools were super crowded, there were no chairs available, and there were no water slides, diving boards, or other kid-friendly things to do. In all fairness, we did show up on a night that was having live entertainment, so it was really packed so that people could come to see the band. However, even though the experience wasn't super fun, it was extremely wheelchair accessible, and even a little fancy. The staff offered us pool lift access for any pool that I wanted to get into. It was a portable lift, and even though we didn't use it, it's nice to know that it was available if we had needed it. The change rooms were fully accessible and even had a shower with a fold-down bench and a handheld shower head in the accessible change room. So I could have showered there if I wanted to. If you are looking for a relaxing spa-like experience that is fully wheelchair accessible, then the Bozeman Hot Springs is a perfect place to stop. Our final destination on our road trip was Rainbow Point Campground near West Yellowstone, Montana. The drive from Bozeman to the campground was even better than the day before. I took so many videos of beautiful creeks and rivers, and I have never seen so many fly fishermen in my entire life. I even got to see people whitewater rafting while we were driving, which was really cool. If anyone watching is in a wheelchair and has ever gone, please tell me about your experience in the comments. It's on my bucket list, but I'm not sure whether I have enough core strength to do it, so I would love to know if anyone with my level of injury, T6, has ever attempted it. We arrived at the campsite at around lunchtime, and I could tell right away that it was gonna be a rustic experience. The roads were all gravel, which was hard to wheel on at times, and there was no flush bathrooms or showers anywhere at the campground. There was access to clean water to wash dishes and to drink, but only from taps at designated spots and not in each campsite. Luckily, there was a tap close to our campsite, which was convenient. Thankfully, I only needed to use the outhouse-type bathrooms to go pee during the day, and to do my bowel program, I used my trailer bathroom, which had running water because we filled up our water tanks for our trailer before we got to the campground. All of the bathrooms were accessible, but most had a bump to get in as a result of the gravel settling around the concrete pads that the bathrooms were built on. Overall though, I'd give this campground a 6 out of 10 for wheelchair accessibility, and it was really nice for anyone that likes a rustic experience that is also wheelchair accessible. Shortly after arriving at the campsite, I met the campsite hosts, who happened to also be YouTubers. They were super nice and looked after me for the entire stay, making sure to check on my family and cleaning the bathrooms extra often so that they were pleasant to use. I put a link in the description of this video if you want to check out their channel. Best campground host ever! We spent a total of 5 days at Rainbow Point Campground, and even though we were just 10 minutes from West Yellowstone and a short drive from Yellowstone National Park, we mostly just stayed at the campsite and spent time with my cousin and her family. We played lots of games, sang lots of campfire tunes like we always do when we're camping, and caught up on all we'd missed in each other's lives over the past year. One of the coolest things about this part of Montana is the groomed trails for snowmobiling and ATVing. My cousin borrowed her father-in-law's side-by-side, and we got to explore the trails, which my kids really loved. It's hard to get out in nature when you have a disability, and these trails were a perfect way for me to see more of the forest that I couldn't see in my wheelchair. On day 3 of our stay, we decided to venture into West Yellowstone finally and see what the tourist town had to offer. But first, we decided to venture down to a little campground that was nearby, to a restaurant they had called Campfire Lodge for breakfast. It is a beautiful little restaurant perched on the bank of a river. It had the biggest and best pancakes I'd ever seen in my life. And when I tell you, if you go there, just order one. I'm telling you, just order one. They are humongous. After breakfast, we headed into West Yellowstone and spent the day wandering in and out of the many, many souvenir shops looking for unique keepsakes that we could bring home. Most of the shops had exactly the same merchandise, such as t-shirts and hats, so it got a little redundant after a while, but we did manage to find some souvenirs that we liked. Jacob got a cool belt buckle, Jamie got a sweatshirt, and I got candy. Not exactly a keepsake, but it's what looked good to me at the time. Bathrooms were hard to come by in West Yellowstone because most shops didn't have public restrooms, and the ones that did required you to buy something in order to be able to use it. I managed to convince a restaurant to let me and Jamie use the bathroom the first time I had to pee, and then later when I had to pee again, I found some public bathrooms outside a food truck area. If you plan to go to West Yellowstone, make sure you keep an eye out for public bathrooms, or maybe plan to stop for lunch at one of the restaurants so that you can use the bathroom when you're there. If you want to do something more exciting than just shop for souvenirs in West Yellowstone, there are plenty of other fun things to do. There is a grizzly bear and wolf sanctuary, as well as a dinner theater that both look wheelchair accessible from the pictures. And for able-bodied people, there is a zip lining and adventure course. If you've ever been to Banff or Jasper in Alberta, West Yellowstone is very similar. Lots of people, very expensive, but mostly worth it. By day 5 of our stay at Rainbow Valley Campground, I was totally graveled out. Getting to and from the bathroom and my cousin's campsite meant that I had to wheel on gravel multiple times a day, and while it was doable and not really that hard, it got frustrating after 5 days. At least 3 times a day, I would catch my front caster on a rock and nearly fall out of my wheelchair. I love rustic camping, but by day 5, I was ready to get back to pavement. We said our goodbyes and began the long drive home. We were on a tighter timeline going home than we were on the way there, so we decided to only stop once in Shelby, Montana. I booked a campsite that advertised having pool access to the hotel next door, but when we arrived, we discovered the pool was under construction. But luckily, there was a neat war memorial right next to the campground, which we decided to check out. So Joe just made me go up that big hill in my wheelchair, which was really scary, and nobody taped it, but it was freaking freaky, and it doesn't even look like anything from the background, but it was really scary. There was like that part back there that was really steep, that I had to like hold myself on. Oh, and by the way, I'm in my scooter thing, so I'm not just in my wheelchair. That would have taken 100 years. But I made it. And I realize I'm very scared of heights in my wheelchair, because apparently it's not very scary when you're walking. But I'm always afraid of careening out of control down a hill in my wheelchair, so if anybody else is freaked out of like hills and heights like I am, please put it in the comments so that I know I'm not crazy, because Joe said if he was sitting in a chair at the angle I was, he wouldn't be scared. Which I know he wouldn't, because he can just stand up. The next day was the final leg of our trip. We made a pit stop at our acreage to drop off our RV, and then we headed the rest of the way home as a thunderstorm rolled in. The last few hours of the drive were bittersweet. I was sad that the vacation was over, but so happy to be headed home to my own bed, unlimited running water, and accessible spaces. No vacation is ever perfect, especially when you have a disability. New places can be intimidating when you aren't sure what the accessibility might look like, and there are always inevitable challenges along the way. On this particular trip, just like on every other, I had to miss out on some of the fun and cool experiences, which is always frustrating and sad, but I've learned to make the most of the moments I can be a part of. I've also learned that things can be awesome and awful at the same time, and that's okay. I can go on a holiday with my family and be super stressed out some of the time, but also really love making the memories with my kids and with my husband. I can hate gravel, but still love camping. I can miss out on a hike with my family, but still really enjoy the view while I wait for them. If you're watching this and you're paralyzed or you have a disability, I hope you see that fabulous vacations are still possible when you're in a wheelchair, even though there are frustrating challenges along the way. I'd love to hear about some of your favorite vacations in the comments, or maybe some of the challenging things that you experience while you're on vacation and how you deal with them. Thanks so much for coming along with me on this road trip, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Bye!